साथ क्या गुजर रहा है हम समझ सकते हैं, but it is not, you cannot get into other person.
Yes, so I would say that grief is nothing but a reflection of love. Okay, so grief is a
It is
reflection.
basically the emotion attached to that person.
Yeah, grief is a reflection of loss. A loss is something that is, something or someone plays a very important role in your life.
Yes, sometimes we come across few health issues where we know
Exactly.
what's going to happen.
One of the grief that we all experience during COVID is also called as collective grief or a public grief.
Like you said that when you lost your wife, at that time your daughter was 3 years.
So that's a very, very difficult and a complicated grief, I would say, because the child cannot express those emotions as very well. The child will mostly only do, either he will cry.
Yes, I think we are live now. Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to this amazing podcast once again. Krishna Talks, the podcast show. I'm trying to bring in different fields of spheres of people, different experiences, different kind of modalities, different kinds of experiences. Like we have shared relationship issues. We had yesterday I bought one Ayurvedic doctor. But along with this, we forget that there are a lot of emotions in us. So today I have a uh, very special person, because it's not easy for anybody to come on a podcast live and share their journey in certain topics. But I really thank this person for coming forward and sharing why he's doing what he's doing. I want to invite Mr. Deepak Dopure for coming here. Thank you so much, Deepak, for coming here. And he is a certified grief coach. Yes, we are going to talk about grief, the different types of grief. We all go through emotions, but it is not talked about much. This is something which needs awareness. We have seen the COVID pandemic where people had to go through a lot of emotions. I mean, that was the one of the period when a lot of people lost their loved ones. It's not only about loss, grief can be of different types. So we are going to touch the sensitive topic of grief and emotional resilience from a certified grief expert who has been certified by grief.com, one of the reputed institutes in the world. Welcome, Deepak, to this podcast, and thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you, Krishnaveni ji. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be along with your guests and on your podcast. So, really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, as you know, what we will be sharing, and I really would like to know what made you choose as to become a grief expert. It really shook me up when I came across your profile. I was going through it, said grief expert. I had no clue what a grief expert or emotion. Yes, of course, I have heard about emotional resilience experts and other things, law of attraction experts, relationship expert. This word really catch my attention. That's the reason when I spoke to you. So tell us about you. How did you start this?
Sure. So, bang on, you are the most important question that you have started with. So, yes, definitely, as you said, it is it is it is a very difficult topic. It's a topic that is not been that much explored in India. Okay, and I came across this thing because I went through this own journey myself when 5 years back. I come from an IT background actually. I've been in the IT industry for about 16 years, 15 to 16 years. I've worked in IT industry, and as part of that journey, I also spent about 7 to 8 years working in Netherlands in European geography. Okay, so quite a long time, and there itself something happened in my life that was 5 years back, and when I was living in Netherlands in Amsterdam, um, along with my wife and my daughter, 2.5 years old at that point of time, my wife was suddenly detected with cancer. We're not going too much into the details as such, but that was a detection on the blood cancer. She got started with the treatment, but unfortunately, after 6 months, she passed away actually due to some multiple organ failures because of the post cancer treatment. Okay, and that's when I found myself uh, falling kind of into a bottomless pit, not knowing how to manage everything, because I had no idea. In 6 months, my life just turned around from a 360-degree turn. You know what I was looking at. I was very career-centric person, uh, and suddenly I have to actually change my focus because my daughter was there, and I had to look after that. and I still have to manage
How
my
old
career.
she was at that time, your daughter?
At that time, she was not even 3 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the thing, and suddenly I had to recalculate and recalibrate my priorities in life, and also to somehow take along with the career, because cannot let the career stay back, because again it has an implication on finances and everything. And I was still working there in Netherlands. Luckily I had some good supportive colleagues that helped me along, because I was hardly operating at my capacity of 10%, and that's when I realized that grief is such a powerful emotion, and there are so many emotions that are involved and associated with it, that it can really rob away all your capability to, you know, capability to think, capability to perform, decision making, problem solving abilities that are specially used in the space of career. Hardly you have them. You feel like you just don't have any capacity. And I went through that myself. And for almost about 6 months was hardly I was doing anything, and for a year it was quite difficult for me to bring my capacity back. So that's where the things started, and I went into a very hard grief myself, uh, because it was a relationship of about 17 years that we had been together, and all of a sudden this happened, and was quite hard for me for 2 3 years. Then I came back to India in 2020 before COVID, because it was no longer possible for me to manage my daughter and my career and everything there. So, and after that, I, yeah, immediately I did not go into it, because I was coping with myself. Okay. And I was trying to take wherever I could take help. I was trying to do that to manage myself, because I know that I can't let myself get down on the grief, because I have my daughter for whom I have to be there. Okay.
Yes.
And
And that child itself is going through
she
emotion of
herself is
mother's loss.
definitely going through a grief. Okay. And she has a different way of expressing her grief than me, right? And slowly after, I would say that after 4 years, I thought, I mean, this was there already after 2 years, that I want to do something in this space, but I had no idea how to do about it. And I was still struggling myself. So I couldn't start at that point of time. But my coaching journey started in 3 years back, and I worked in other spaces, but I was not fully ready to go into this space. But I only found myself ready about 1.5 years back, when I then entered into the space. I got myself certified from one of the world's most reputed grief coach, and then with my own experience in grief, learning and understanding, and my own
Because
spiritual
we cannot get away with what has happened. We have to
exactly,
move
yeah.
forward with it, right?
Absolutely. So that's when all these things happen, and I started that journey. And now I'm working. I'm taking some groups. So what I look as that I try to help people build resilience, so that they can bounce back, because something that has happened is can't be changed, as you said rightly, right? It can't be changed, right? But you have to just manage your emotions, you manage the grief, and witness the grief, and all these things has to be done
When
while
did you
helping
realize
others.
that you want to take up grief as a profession moving forward?
Yeah, I when I started looking into coaching, that's about 3.5 years back. At that time only, I wanted to get into the space of grief, but I had no idea how to do that. Okay. I had no one to look forward in India who was doing that, and not even at that point of time, I did not knew anyone outside.
Internationally, there are a lot of people who are doing
Internationally,
grief
there
as
are,
a
but at that time, I had
expert
no
who are
idea
helping.
about it. Yeah. So and I was also maybe not fully ready at that time. I did not push myself too much into that. So I started with whatever I could. I'm into the space of career also, career coaching, especially for IT professionals. So that I started with, and that I'm still doing at this point of time. But slowly, when the clarity began I would say in 2023 December, it really started to hit me very hard that something was calling me, that okay, I have to do this. Something is missing that I'm not doing. Even though I'm doing coaching, there was something that was still missing. And I figured out, okay, there is a reason why I came into this space of coaching and I'm not doing that.
And not many know that there is a coach, a certified institute which is offering this as a course also.
Definitely, there are, because this is an area where people feel there is nothing that can be done. But it is not true, actually. It is not true. And I know from my experience and from my trainings and my learnings that there is a lot of things that can be done. We do not know how to grieve,
We do.
do not know how to support someone who is going through a grief.
Because for few people it takes, because yes, of course, grief are different types. We'll come back to it. But losing someone is not easy for anybody. Though we know it is nature's call, it is God's call, it is something which is not in our hands. We just have to accept it and move forward it. As you said, it was a relation of 17 years.
Yes.
It's a long time. And still you will have those memories along with you, but
Definitely.
we have to move forward with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I want to bring along my practical experience, because I learned a lot in this journey. So 5 years along, I know what are the problems that these people are facing. Okay. And believe me, those who are going through grief, only those know what what impact it has. Who are not gone through it, they will not understand that. Okay.
Yes, when we say, normally there is a saying, तुम्हारे साथ क्या गुजर रहा है हम समझ सकते हैं, but it is not, till you
नहीं
cannot
समझ-
get into other person's shoes, definitely not.
Exactly.
हम बिल्कुल उनके इमोशंस, उनके जगह से कोई भी नहीं, वर्ल्ड का कोई भी दूसरा इंसान नहीं समझ सकता,
नहीं
बिकॉज सबके परिस्थितियां, सबके एनवायरनमेंट, ऑल आर डिफरेंट फॉर डिफरेंट पीपल.
exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Can you
absolutely.
throw some light on what are the different types of griefs, uh, for that? Because
Yes.
it's not only a personal loss. Grief can be of anything. Maybe a separation from a year long, longer relationship, or it can be anything. So can you just share something?
Yes. So I would say that grief is nothing but a reflection of love. You know, if you imagine a coin, if one side there is love, the other side there is grief. Okay. So if you love someone, something, or whatever it is, and if you lose that someone, something, you are going to grieve. Okay. So grief is a
It is
reflection of
basically
love.
the emotion attached to that person.
Yeah, grief is a reflection of loss. A loss is something that is, something or someone plays a very important role in your life. And suddenly now that thing or a person is not there, right? How are you going to deal with that? That brings grief. Okay. And some people also say that, how long are you going to grieve? Okay. And I answer that to that. How long are you going to stop loving that person? Are you going to stop loving that person anytime? No, then you are also going to grieve till the end of your life. Only your association with the grief will change. Right now, maybe in the initial phases of grief, it is associated more with
Yes.
pain and more with sadness. Over the period of time, the journey is that it will be associated more with positive memories, good feelings, and that's the association. But you are always
That's
going.
when we say time heals everything. So
Yes,
it's a cycle.
it only changes the association. You will never stop loving that person, so you will never stop grieving them also, right? So also in the case for you mentioned that different types of grief, right? So you also experience grief when you lose a relationship, whether it is a romantic relationship like a marriage, or a girlfriend or boyfriend relationship, a breakup of something like that happens, right? Or even sometimes you grieve when you lose a very close friend, not because of loss, but maybe because of some differences or something like that.
Yes, yes, that's
You also, because that friends play a lot of huge role in our life. And if we lose those friends also, that time we grieve. I have worked with a client like that who was going through a grief because of loss of some great friends.
sometimes the best of the friendships are broken, and they
Exactly.
feel like, why did this happen? We had a strong, beautiful bond.
Exactly. And people will not understand that, especially these kind of griefs. And that's where there are different types of griefs, which I will tell you. People will say, what to grieve about this? A friend who grieves about a friend? Nothing has happened. And you can't answer that. You don't have anything to answer, but you know that you don't feel like that. You know that I'm not that person. You know that I'm not able to manage my emotions, right? So yeah, that's basically it. And there are, if I just very shortly tell you, about certain types of grief. This is also called as a disenfranchised grief, where people judge you. Okay, that okay, how can you grieve for this? Sometimes there is also a grief that is associated. Suppose there is a toxic relationship, okay,
Mm.
and that relationship ends, okay, uh, and then you may still grieve. And now you may ask me,
Yes.
why a person will grieve for a toxic relationship, okay, and people will not understand that. It's people,
Understand, yes.
they will say, what are you
It's not
grieving
only
for?
that
Always.
breakup, but it's the relation which they had maybe for 5 years, 10 years, or even
Yeah,
maybe for a year.
exactly. So they may say that it was anyway a toxic relationship. Why are you grieving about it? But it's not that you are not grieving about that person. You are grieving the loss of that relationship that could have been, you know, that could have been there, but you did not get it.
वो होता है ना, क्या हो सकता था और क्या
वो
हो गया,
था वो
what it
तुम्हें
could
नहीं
have been.
मिला, उसका ग्रीफ होता है वो। ओके,
Hmm.
सो ऐसे भी होते हैं, बहुत सारे अलग टाइप ऑफ ग्रीफ्स भी होते हैं। एंटिसिपेटरी ग्रीफ भी होता है, जहाँ पे द लॉस हैज नॉट ऑलरेडी नॉट येट हैपेंड, बट यू सी एंटिसिपेट दैट ओके, शायद इट इज नॉट गोइंग टू लास्ट वेरी लॉन्ग, राइट?
Yes, sometimes we come across a few health issues where we know
एग्जैक्टली,
what's going to happen, and what's going to happen is different from the journey what that person is suffering and their family members are suffering along with that. That is also a pain.
absolutely, absolutely. One of the grief that we all experience during COVID is also called as collective grief or a public grief.
Hmm.
कोविड में हम लोगों ने जो एक्सपीरियंस किया वाज अ कलेक्टिव ग्रीफ. Everyone
Yes.
was somehow experiencing grief at certain level, okay?
And everybody was feeling for whatever was happening, not only in our city, our country, पर पूरी दुनिया में जो हो रहा था, वो इमोशंस, वो ग्रीफ सबको ही अफेक्ट कर रहे थे.
Perfect, that's
और
why
एक
it is
डर भी था कि क्या हम सरवाइव कर पाएंगे.
exactly. Yes, yes, so that's also there, right? So there are various types of grief actually.
How can,
Pet loss
like
वाला
as you
grief भी
said,
होता है. Pet loss
I'm
वाला
sorry.
grief भी, sometimes pet loss,
हाँ, हाँ,
people
yes,
do
yes.
not understand that. They feel अरे कुत्ता ही तो है, but they don't know that okay, that dog is like a member for them, a family member for them, or that cat is a family member for them. So it's, people
Yes,
say harsh
nowadays I
things,
see
but very
pets is also not considered as pets. It's like a family member for
family, they
many of
call
them.
them as their beta and beti, right?
Like many people, I've seen, अरे वो तो अपने डॉग के डेथ पे इतना वो कर रहा है, इतना करने की क्या जरूरत है? But we won't understand that emotion.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Like you said that when you lost your wife at that time, your daughter was 3 years. How
yeah.
difficult it is to uh, counsel children when they are going through a personal loss or something. Like we saw
Yes.
in COVID, lot of kids also lost their parents. Many of them lost both of their parents to COVID or something like that. What kind of an emotion that child goes through, or how that can be helped?
Yes. So that's a very, very difficult and a complicated grief, I would say, because the child cannot express those emotions as very well. The child will mostly only do, either he will cry, either he or she cry, he will cry it out, or otherwise he will go into a shell or something. So it's very difficult. You have to be very, very observant about what is happening,
Hmm.
because sometimes it is not very, and for my case, my daughter was not even 3 years old. So she she was quite young to even understand that kind of a loss,
Understand. Yes.
I would say at that point of time. So I can say that maybe it was not easy, but it was not that hard for me. But as the child grows, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, that's when the
That's
attachments
right.
really get
Maybe
stronger and
between the
stronger.
age group between 5 to 10 or 12,
Definitely,
maybe
that's
at
true.
15,
Very
16,
strong.
children become little bit mature to understand what is death. But for a child who is between 5 to 10 or to 12, that is a very sensitive age group for the kids to understand.
Absolutely, yes. But even a child, like for my daughter's age, she also, I know that she is grieving, because there are certain things that she doesn't like to get into, or she doesn't like to talk about. And when I look at it at a deeper level, I understand that somewhere there is some kind of a connection with the loss. That's why she says that.
Yes.
She may
Hmm.
not have the right vocabulary to talk about it, And
Hmm.
but then what I do is sometimes I consciously take her along and and I ask her, okay, do you want to speak about mama, or do you want to talk about mama, and do you have anything to say, something, so I have to consciously tell her that yes, you
Yes.
can talk about it. It is okay to talk
Hmm.
about it, and it is okay to cry as well.
Hmm.
So that's
Hmm.
how it is, I would say.
Yes. Thank you for explaining it, the different types of emotions when one goes through in different types of emotions and the losses. Here, I'm really curious to know, and I'm thinking more what would be your answer here. How can someone think of a professional help when they are grieving for someone? Like you are a grief expert, you counsel people during grief. How does one have that resilience to approach someone, and how important it is?
Yes, a very good question actually, especially in the context of India, because
Mm.
this is not something that is common, that you can hear. I don't know in India if there is anyone else who is working on this space as like a grief coach or so. There are psychologists, there are
Yes,
therapists, so they are there. But especially people who are going through grief, helping them, there is no one who is doing that actually.
that's
So
what
the
I said. I have heard about emotional resilience experts, NLP experts, and so many other things, but not a grief expert. That's when your profile seemed very, very different for me when I was looking into it.
because their needs are different actually. These are not typical things. They're a person who is going through grief. There are five needs, as I say. There are five needs that needs to be addressed for a person who is going through grief. And the first need is to allow their grief to be witnessed. You know, the grief wants to be witnessed. The grief wants to come out and express itself in the form of stories, in the form of what happened, what they experienced. But people do not find that right and a safe space to talk about it, or wherever they talk, they feel like nobody wants to talk about it. Okay.
Like we see many people cry it out and bring their emotions.
Yeah, because they
But
have no
many
one.
people don't even cry, but they have the emotion. But I've seen many people misjudging people that are she has lost someone close, but she's not even crying. It
Exactly.
doesn't
But
mean that
also
they don't have the emotion.
that does happen. That does happen, and that's why I said we live in a very grief illiterate society. Although there is no house in the world where this kind of death
Yes.
has not happened, but still we don't know how to deal with someone who is going through grief. you know so that's when I want to go back and connect to that point where the first need is to get your grief witnessed.
Mm.
Okay. Second need is to safely express your emotions, because if there normally people do not find a right place to get their grief witnessed. Okay. Sorry. So and because there is no right space to witness, their emotions are also unexpressed. They are not able to express their emotion because they don't have the right and a safe space for it. Okay. So that's the second need. Okay. The third need is sometimes in a grief journey, when you have gone through a loss or kind of, there is a guilt that is there. Okay, I should have done like that, or maybe if I had done something like that, this wouldn't have happened, or something like that. Guilt has to be addressed. You have to release the burden of guilt, because guilt is a very, very strong emotion. It holds your grief journey and doesn't allow you to process it further. So
Mm.
guilt has to be addressed. Fourth is about managing certain old wounds, because there is a tendency, if you have experienced some old wounds, maybe some kind of traumas or some kind of things in your childhood or so, they have a tendency to come and show up during this grief. The way they will grieve is by using those kind of, and sometimes it is not a very healthy way to use it.
Mm.
So we have to assess and see if there are childhood and old wounds that are causing you to not rightly grieve. We may have to go and process and heal those old wounds and create a different approach. Finally, we need to work as the person who is going through grief to find a meaning in your life after the loss. So not in the meaning in the loss itself. There is no meaning in loss. Okay. But what is it that you can do in your life now is what, when you find, you get something to hook upon. Okay. Otherwise you feel like, what, I'm just falling down and I have nothing to hold upon. And this is a stage where you feel like somewhere I can hold myself, right? So these are the five needs of grief that needs to be addressed.
Feel like if somebody has lost someone and there are two people who were attached to that one person, both
Yeah,
will have different kind of emotions for
exactly.
that particular person. One person may get away with it or accept that in a shorter period of time. The other person might take some little more time. Like, just for example, females have a tendency of crying and expressing their emotions. Men tend to keep it inside, and it's not that they don't have the option of crying. They can, but it is how the society is built. So how do you see that a couple, as a couple together, grieving for someone who was close to them?
Yes, definitely. See, everyone grieves differently, and every time we grieve differently. Okay, it's like pregnancy. As we say, right? Every pregnancy is different, right? Just like that, every grief is also different. Because I have experienced grief myself 5 years back, that does not mean that the next time it something happens in my life, I will
Yes.
be able to manage it. It's not.
Mm.
I may need support at that time again. Okay. So every time I may grieve differently, right? So, and everyone also grieves differently. And there is a tip, what you said is right. Women typically have a tendency of they do cry it out, they actually express, and they do try to take help as well.
Mm.
I've seen in my community there are more women than men. Okay.
Maybe women just speak out their heart outs to their colleagues, their friends, or something. I don't see men even do that at times.
Men try because in our society we are trained that men need to be strong, they cannot cry,
But they
right?
also have emotions, right? It is the
They
same
also have
human.
emotions, right? So some this perception is changing a little bit in the last few years when some celebrities and they have come out and they have things, but still it is still like it is being looked upon. If a man cries, it has been looked upon like kind of a, he's a weak man, he's a weak person. Okay. So that's why men have that tendency not to open up. Okay, they hold on their feelings and they try to just go along, because of course a man is also responsible for bringing, for the financials and everything and the
Yes.
responsibility. So he diverts his focus onto that area and
Mm.
doesn't process the grief. But
Mm.
that does not mean that grief is it's there, and it will manifest into something else. It will manifest into a physical illness. It will manifest into an emotional or a mental kind of a problem. Because it's an energy, and if that energy is not released, energy can neither be created nor be destroyed, right? It can
Yes.
only be
Yes.
transformed. So if the energy could not be released, it will take a different form. And grief has a tendency to manifest into a physical illness after a certain point of time if it is not addressed. And everyone will agree with me who has gone through that grief.
Yes. Thank you for explaining that. Going with the times, the present times, as we have seen the world changing every second in last 1.5 to 2 years with the coming up of AI in every field.
Yes.
But we all know that yes, it cannot replace the human emotions,
No,
human connections. How
yes.
important is for anyone to build that emotional resilience, and share some tips? How can someone who's very emotional, not alone the grief, somebody who is very, very emotional, how they can build up their emotional resilience?
Right. So good point, Krishna Viniji. See, we are living in the world of AI now, and AI is completely dominating us in every
Even
aspects, in
when we
every
type
space.
in
It
chat
is like taking
GPT
over,
something,
trying to, it's like, helping you, definitely helping you a lot in our career and business, but at the same time, it is also taking away a lot of.
we were discussing about the kind of steps that we should take for someone to build an emotional resilience.
Correct. Yeah. So, yeah, I think you also asked a prior question to that, how the AI and the influences. So I was talking
Yes,
about
yes,
that, because we are social being, right? And, we need connection. We need real connections. If you
yes,
join a meeting, suppose if you join a webinar and you realize that, okay, this is a recorded webinar, you will immediately feel disconnected,
yes,
because even though that webinar might be very good, whatever maybe talk is absolutely relevant, but you still at somewhere you know that okay, there is no real person sitting. That's where you know that, you know. So your heart really craves for something, a real connection, a real being, right? So that's where AI and these, they cannot take over that role. That's why you need people, you need connections, and that's why communities are so important. And when we are in a community, we can heal together and grow together. So that's why, that's what is answering to your first question. Second is about building resilience that you asked, right?
Yes.
So there are various steps on building resilience, and in my community, I have a program that I give, that I follow along, an 8 weeks long challenge, that I walk through my participants who are in my program. So it's a specifically designed program for resilience building. Okay, and I cover that in 8 live sessions. Okay, so that is one aspect, and then there are other things that I provide as part of my offerings or so. And what I also believe is, like, resilience is first. It has to be addressed at an intellectual level. Okay,
Yes.
first, if your brain understands what is going on in the background. Okay, then once you get that, then you are able to, okay, yeah, now I understand why I'm getting this thought. Now I understand that, okay, this is what I have to do. So intellectually, first it has to be understood. Then you have to go to the heart, because heart needs healing. Once the brain is convinced, the brain can work with your heart and your mind to help it to heal itself. Okay.
More of a psychological counseling also.
Exactly. So from your intellectual level, so my 8 week program really works at an intellectual level. Okay. And then I have some healing program and sessions that I offer, wherein I bring in some powerful modalities of healing, which I have found it myself useful in my own journey. And I help them, like there are some meditations, some meditative techniques are there, some breathing things are there, that are quite helpful, because that works on at the level of heart. Okay.
Hmm.
And then finally, my biggest thing, I would say, whatever I could do, my savior, बोलते हैं ना, वो तिनका जो मुझे मिला था वो spirituality था. For me,
Hmm.
whatever I am doing is only for spirituality. I am very much connected to my spirituality, and I also help my the people who are working with me to find their own spirituality. I do not believe in promoting my spirituality to everyone, but I believe in
Bring
helping
them
them find out their own
their
spirituality,
own.
their own
That's a
path,
good point
right?
which you had pointed.
Exactly,
Yes.
yeah. So because in our Indian culture, there are various paths to reach to the top of the mountain. It is not just one path. You have to find what path suits you the best. I
Yes.
did my exploration in my journey, which path suits me the best. I found that this part does not work, this does not work. I know what works for me. Okay.
Hmm.
And I do I do walk my clients through the same journey. Okay, find out what is it that works for you. Okay. And that's the main aspect, the spirituality. I believe if someone is able to connect at a spiritual level, that's when the healing happens. That's when the person really
That's right.
goes on to the next level.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah. So that's what I would.
Thank you, Deepak, for sharing this in a much better way. And I also wanted to ask you one more thing before we end. How do people approach you in daily life for any grief which they want to get counseled?
Yes. So I have various platforms that I'm there. I'm there on Instagram as well. I'm also there on Facebook. Okay. Uh, and you can connect me, or people who are going through some kind of a challenges like that and are looking for help. Okay. They can connect me via Instagram or my website, which is deepakdevpare.com is my website. I'll share the link also. You can put it in the description. Through that as well, there is a way by which they can connect and have a book a session with me.
On an average, how many people approach you for a professional help?
Yeah, the thing is, I have been working like for 1.5 years. So now I have worked with various people. So what I also do is I do a workshop. I do a webinar, a
Workshop.
workshop, I
Hmm.
say. So I'm not doing for last 3-4 weeks now, but before that I did it for 3-4 weeks, and that's where I've got some people who enrolled in my webinar. They came along
Okay.
in the webinar,
So
especially
it's
on.
not right to think that ऐसे webinars में कौन आएगा? People do come for these things
I think there were
also
many people,
to
yes,
find
there were many
answers.
people, yes, to
That
look.
might be new to. I'm asking this question because people don't know that there are person who are available to make them come out of a certain difficult situation in a shorter period of time.
Exactly, yeah. Uh, so that's when mostly when people who come to me, they also say the same thing that, okay, we never thought that there could be help possible on this. And we always asked ourselves why there is no help on this.
Never.
Okay. Because we don't, they, most of them whom I have worked with, they all said that, I do not find myself uh, going to a psychiatrist or I don't like to go to a psychiatrist because I'm not a
Yes, that's a perception, especially in India. If we ask somebody to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist for emotional counseling or for their own betterment, they feel कि ये क्या बोल रहा है? ये तो मैं थोड़ी पागल थोड़ी हूँ. That's it's a layman's language. That's what they feel. But it is for their betterment to come out of a situation.
yeah, but they also, it is like, whoever comes to me, they say that I was not able to connect to what they were saying because somewhere I felt इन्हें तो पता नहीं है कि मैं किस से जा रहा हूँ,
Yes, yes.
right?
Hmm.
So they were able to connect with me because they know that whatever they were saying, I can understand it. And that's where people look for similarities. People look
Similarity.
for similarities in their journey. अरे मैंने भी ये experience किया है. अच्छा हाँ मैंने भी किया हुआ है. That's where people
That's
find
when they.
right. So that's how it is. Yeah.
Thank you for coming and sharing this because it's not a much touched upon topic. We'll wish to get you more of you in coming time so that we can help people who need you and create awareness on this subject as well because it's not so much explored and people there may be one person craving to get a person whom they can just speak their heart out. If you are one of those, please reach out to Deepak and share your emotions and become resilient towards your emotions. He will definitely help you. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you Deepak for coming and sharing.
Ji, for having me. It was really pleasure to have you and the audience. I really thank you for being there patiently and hearing this out. It was great to
Thank
have.
you. Thank you everybody. Thank you.
You.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you everybody for watching this emotional podcast. I'll be bringing more on the Krishna Talks, the podcast show. See you tomorrow at 7 p.m. with one more interesting guest with one more beautiful life experience. Thank you everyone. Namaste.